Yorkshire, home of the Bronte sisters, and the landscape that inspired Emily Bronte when she wrote Wuthering Heights. It is also the location for Peter Bowker's new adaptation of the classic novel.
When we were first looking for somewhere to film, there was talk, for all sorts of reasons, this talk of going to Romania, and this talk of going to Ireland, and this talk of... And I was always adamant that it had to be Yorkshire, that there is no way of imitating this landscape. And it's a book that's so rooted in landscape that you would be cheating the audience at some level.
This is an epic story in an epic setting. You can't get more epic than the Yorkshire moors, because they are grand, sweeping landscapes.
You can't make it anywhere else, in my opinion. I think the landscape, the world that they inhabit, the isolation, the ruggedness of this kind of and the beauty of this landscape is absolutely the core of the novel, as well as, and if you're trying to make, you know, a film of Wuthering Heights, it's definitely got to be Wuthering.
I think it's great that Wuthering Heights is being filmed up here, because we're just on the moors and you're able to look at it and go, well, you know, you can feel like what she's writing about, and you can see it there, and the landscape has an effect on the characters.
So am I able to go back? A little further, only a little further, Ellen.
The story has a feeling of isolation. You feel there are only these two rival families, these two big houses with nothing in between time, which makes for a cauldron of passion.
The village of Halton Gill in Littondale was chosen to represent the fictional village of Gimmerton.
Okay, everyone off the radio now, lock it off and stand by to shoot.
We only ended up filming there for one day, actually. It was one of our biggest days of filming. We had to do the Gimmerton Fair, so we had the most number of extras that we've had on any one day. We had to cover the whole road through the village with mud so that it looked like a period road, and we brought in lots of animals, horses and donkeys, pigs, sheep, ducks, you name it. We had those animals there. We also had to cover anything in the village which was obviously modern day, so the red phone box disappeared behind a sort of stable for a horse. But it's the most amazing village sitting in the most amazing landscape, and you can see 360 degrees most of the time. You've got this perfect period landscape.
121, take one. Everyone set, and background, and action. Heathcliff!
Do you not think this horse would suit you well? No? I bought a fine silver locket for Kathy. To recreate that sort of 19th century village atmosphere was terrific. And, you know, it's very hard to tell when you're in the Dales of Yorkshire what's dressing and what's actually still there as it was 170 years ago.
Let's roll, please. Speed.
Yorkshire, of course, doesn't make the job easier in terms of its weather, because it would be okay if it was always sunny or always raining, but it tends to throw both at you in equal measure.
Yeah. Get Chris to show Kevin where it is, please.
While we were filming the scene when I break up the fight between young Heathcliff, we were in a lovely little glade in Gimmerton, I think it was. And the problem we had there is that it would hurl down with rain for about 10 minutes, so we couldn't shoot, and then after the rain we would be infested with midges for about half an hour. Clouds, blue clouds, you couldn't see through them, so with people desperately running around trying to keep the actors from coming out in dirty great lumps all over the place.
Come back again, too high, one line in the belly, good. Come back, one blow to the face, bang, good.
This fight scene was quite frightening at the time when we was doing it, because we had all these people cheering for me and the other boy.
And background. And action.
It actually felt really real, and it kind of scared me at some points. But on the other hand, it was really enjoyable doing it and finding out how the stunts was put together.
What's going on? What is going on? Hey! What's going on? What have you got to say for yourselves? The rest of you, what are you looking at?
Good, well done, guys.
Ciao there.
Halton Gill was also used as the setting for a confrontation between Heathcliff and Nellie, played by Tom Hardy and Sarah Lancashire.
Okay, here we go, folks. And roll, please.
This is a complex story, and because we're not shooting in story order, you really need to have done your homework so that you know exactly the emotional highs and lows of the piece.
Rolling. Rolling. Background.
Action!
Nellie, what news is there, Kathy?
Hopefully by the time you get to do a scene like that, you know exactly where you've come from and where you're going to in your kind of emotional arc.
Even when the scene had to be reshot several weeks later in a completely different location.
Do not persist in this, sir, or I shall be obliged to inform my master, and he shall take measures to secure his house. It's nice to have those scenes when there's a very restrained form of confrontation.
Some locations presented logistical challenges to both cast and crew. For example, when filming took place for a number of days on the dramatic moorland above Sheffield.
They're quite difficult locations to film at because it's quite difficult to get all the equipment actually up onto the moors. So it involves lots of quad bikes and trailers and people and, you know, just quite an effort to get there and get out of there as well. Obviously, lots of things set on the moors, but also Wuthering Heights, the house, as everyone knows, sits on top of the moors. But despite looking far and wide, it was impossible to find an actual Wuthering Heights exterior location house that actually sat on the moors themselves.
Wuthering Heights, the house, is a main character in the story, isn't it? It's just like Heathcliff, really. You can't find a house like that on the moors. They don't exist. They just don't. Nobody builds a house in the wilderness on the moors, you know. So we found a fantastic house in Keighley, I think, which is East Riddlesden, for the exteriors, which has got a fantastic sort of heightened Gothic character to it, really. Found a fabulous house we can shoot the interiors in, which is Oakwell, which is near Batley, I think. And then we found some fantastic moorland that we intend to put the house on by magic of computer graphics.
We built our own gates at the exterior house location, which we filmed through the gates to the house. And then when we went to the moors south of Sheffield, we took those same gates and walls with us and sort of sat them slap bang on top of the moors. There was no house there, obviously. And we filmed various scenes of people leaving and arriving and carriages leaving and arriving. And in a number of those shots, we will actually, in post-production, place our Wuthering Heights house on top of the moors.
The South Yorkshire Moors also gave Andrew Lincoln, who plays Edgar, the chance to show off his horsemanship.
Well, the riding scenes, I was actually quite relieved that you didn't actually catch me being thrown off the horse by my horse Castle. I should have known by his name that he was going to be a bit feisty. No, I do a bit of riding anyway, and I think that to sell the story, you know, that I think the producers and the director seemed to jump on the fact that I could actually navigate a horse.
Wonderful. Yeah. Great.
Sometimes you need a bit of time on a horse to kind of get to know a horse, and for a horse to not want to throw you off its back, really.
Several scenes take place during journeys by horse and carriage. However, the action inside the carriage is not filmed on the moors, but on a different day, in very different circumstances, and on this occasion, in very different weather.
What we do is, several weeks down the line, we put the carriage inside this big black tent, which gives us control of the light and hopefully stops us hearing the rain, which is a bit tricky at the moment, as you can see. And the carriage just sits there without any horses, and we just film all the dialogue. Two men stand by the carriage, rocking it a little bit, making us think we're on the move, and that's the idea, really. A bit strange, but perfectly normal to us.
Yes, please, John.
Sound speed. 544, take 4.
And action!
We had to shoot the scene in the carriage with me, Heathcliff and Hareton, where we're just coming back from Linton's funeral, and we had just cloth sort of covering the carriage, and it was just pouring torrential rain.
Brilliant.
We were quite lucky because we were inside the carriage, so we kept warm and dry, but I think all the crew were getting soaked.
I'm sorry.
And I am sorry. The things I said to you, did not mean it.
The wild Yorkshire weather may reflect the mood of Wuthering Heights, but it caused problems for nearly everyone involved in the filmmaking.
Well, the weather's been a nightmare, really. We've had rain and wind since we've been here. It's only the last few days we're now having some warm weather. But that was difficult because you need to keep the wigs just get blown about. And it's okay to let things look natural, but they looked like they just had a plug in to it's like a 2,000 watts or something, you know, especially when we're up on the crags on the top of the moors, was whether the wigs would stay on in all the rain that we had.
Cut.
They all got windburnt. That was the worst thing. You wouldn't think, in the weather that we were having, which was atrocious at this time of year, that they would be affected. Of course, after day one on the moors, everybody was beacon red.
21, take 5. And action.
Yeah, it's meant to be summer. What happened to summer? No, it's rained and rained and rained. But ironically, the days we needed rain, we didn't have any. Had to get rain machines.
That's a good gate. Cheers, Tom. Gate's clear. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, guys.
For the filming of the interior Wuthering Heights scenes, the production moved for 2 weeks to Oakwell Hall.
Turn over.
Sound speed.
7, 2, 3, take 1. And action.
It's always a pleasure to be involved in a classic adaptation of one of the great British novels. But Wuthering Heights is something that people think that they know the story, but actually this particular adaptation takes loads of the themes of the book and mixes it about. It's just a pleasure, really, to do such a meaty role.
How dare you! Get out of my house! Get out!
Do not bring him near me, Nellie. Not unless you want to see me dash his brains out.
Oh, it sounds cliche, but it is a total dream come true, really. Especially as, for me, obviously coming from the northeast and getting to play such an iconic northern character as well.
Hindley?
I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think there's been another northern Cathy before, so it's quite nice to be representing the north.
Okay. I was thinking in my head that maybe she hits him first and grabs him and then sort of gets to this bit here.
In preparation for a fight scene, Rebecca Knight and Tom Payne, who play Catherine and Linton, rehearsed the action with stunt coordinator Mark Cass and director Koki Gedroich.
I think, you know, it's a lot of two-handed like that, screaming in anger, you know.
Because he's so ineffectual and so kind of ill.
I mean, I've just had a pretty big shock. He's just said that I'm going to be forced to marry him in the morning, which, you know, I'm not prepared to do, and I want to get out, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. So I just kind of, how Wild Street comes out.
And my character's quite incapacitated with my tuberculosis, and it's really, you know, I think it should come across as really quite shocking, because I'm really at that point kind of half dead, really.
You think so? It doesn't look you! Oh my father!
Well, I take it from this touching scene that you have made your offer of marriage, and young Miss Linton is expressing some misgivings.
So most of our interior Wuthering Heights has all been filmed at a house in the outskirts of Leeds, but this is Cathy's bedroom, which we built inside the studio. And the reason we built it in the studio is that we needed to do a sequence where Cathy's ghost punches her hand through the window. Heathcliff grabs hold of her hand and he has a conversation through the window with the ghost of Cathy. So we couldn't do that in the real location, so that's why we've had to build the bedroom here. And unfortunately, we had a little problem today in that Charlotte Riley, who plays Cathy, has not been very well this morning. So she's not actually well enough to come to set. So rather surprisingly for Rebecca, who plays Catherine, I've had to ask her if she would mind being the ghostly arm that punches through the window. So when she arrived this morning, she wasn't expecting to do this at all, so she's had a quick rehearsal with the stunt coordinator, and she's about to do it.
Tom?
Nice and quiet, please, guys.
Just be careful with her arm on the serrated edges, if you can, when she punches through.
Turning, guys, quiet and still, please.
Punch right through.
Action.
Yeah.
Got there.
I loved it actually, and towards the end I was really... There's ghosts in this place. Or bad set dressing. There you go. Wuthering Heights. Kathy's in the house.